Welcome to Sports Saved My Life. My name is Clayton Freck, and I'm the CEO and founder of Angel City Sports. We know the power of sport to change and in some cases save lives. We hear these compelling stories every day, and we created this show to share them with the world. Enjoy the show, and remember to like, follow, share, and comment. All right, so today I am joined by a great friend of mine and an important part of the Angel City Sports family, Sarah Kirwan. Among other things, Sarah is a wheelchair basketball athlete, coach, and program manager. Sarah and her two older sisters were born and raised in Sioux Falls, Iowa. In her youth, she was an athlete and musician. She played a variety of sports, including track and field, gymnastics, basketball, cheer, and volleyball. She also played the saxophone for over 10 years. She considers herself an overachiever and a rebel, which I love. More on that later. She attended the University of Iowa on a volleyball and music scholarship, majoring in English, journalism, and mass communications. She moved to LA shortly thereafter to get her master's degree at Cal State LA in public administration. She's an incredibly accomplished woman and has worked across a variety of industries such as healthcare, higher ed, nonprofit, government, entertainment, and the list just goes on. She currently has her own consulting firm, Eye Level Communications, which is focused on disability, diversity, and inclusion. And she hosts her own podcast. Cool to be here on ours. Includes this.
Thank you.
Her disability journey started in 2011 when she was diagnosed with relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis. Hopefully I got that right.
Yeah.
And then in 2019, she was diagnosed with superior semicircular canal dehiscence. Gosh, I asked you earlier and I still got it wrong.
You're so close.
A rare inner ear disorder. We're going to hear a lot more about that. But more importantly for this show, she knows the adaptive sports world very well. Dating back to her tenure as a public information officer at Rancho Rehabilitation Center here in LA, she co-founded the Shield Maidens back in 2015, which at the time, and really still would be considered, California's only women's wheelchair basketball team. And she's actually now working with Angel City Sports to sort of bring the Shield Maidens into the Angel City family. She just kind of does everything. She plays, she coaches, she mentors, she leads. I am so excited to hear her story today. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Clayton. I'm really honored to be here. I'm humbled, as I told you earlier, to be amongst so many amazing athletes and elite athletes that you've had on here. I wanted to make a couple corrections. I did not co-found the Shield Maidens. That was Paralympian Courtney Ryan and her University of Arizona wheelchair basketball teammate, Molly Bloom, who now has her doctorate, PhD. And so I've been involved from the beginning, from 2015.
I got you.
And then I was also born in Sioux City, Iowa. Sioux Falls is in South Dakota, but
I apologize. As I was saying that, I was like, oh, did I screw that up? Okay.
They're right. They're close. They're close, you know?
You would think they would be close, but whatever. Okay. Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay. First question. What comes to mind when you hear the title of the show for you personally?
Oh my gosh. Well, I have to tell you, I love this title for so many reasons. Sports saved my life. Because I think that it can be literal. It can be, theoretical, so many opportunities there. And for me, what comes to mind when I think about sports saving my life, especially adaptive sports, is connection for me. It's connection and community, but most importantly, connection. I feel like oftentimes after we have a diagnosis or we're going through difficult health issues, you feel very disconnected from the community that you're in, the temporarily able bodies, I call them tabs, temporarily able-bodied,
Mm.
and the disability community.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're on the court playing wheelchair basketball, describe that feeling for me, because I've watched you play a bit and I see the smile and the energy, but like what are the emotions that are going through you as you're playing?
Oh man. When I first started playing, it was the only space where I live almost on the edge of not being disabled enough,
Mm-hmm.
but not being well enough or able-bodied enough, either non-disabled enough. And so for me, when I started playing wheelchair basketball and I got on the court, it was just as if none of that mattered. And I was just completely accepted by the team for who I was as I came, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I overheated one day in the chair and went blind in my left eye, there was no judgment. There was no, well, you look fine. Like, just suck it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, come and play. It was a recognition and a validation of what I was experiencing. And when I couldn't catch the ball, right? When I couldn't feel my fingertips some days, it wasn't, oh, she's just making it up, or this happened or whatnot. It was very much, we accept you into this community as you are. And that is why I have continued to play. That's why I have continued to support, and that I really promote more women with invisible disabilities like mine to get involved in adaptive sports and to get that connection and that community that we all need so badly.
I think that, so I use the word belonging to explain really the power of sport, but the power of what we're trying to do at Angel City. But I love what you said about acceptance, because you're right. There is this sort of inherent empathy and appreciation and acceptance for each other, kind of regardless of what's going on. Everybody's got something, and we're very open about it in this community, which is different, I think, than the rest of our lives. So I may steal that acceptance term from you, because I think it's a little different than belonging. It's close, but it's a little different. It's sort of being accepted as you are, right? Whatever that means.
You come as you come, as you are, and yeah, it
really
very
good.
much is acceptance.
Okay. This is a tough one for a lot of people. Who are you in one sentence?
Oh my gosh, this is funny because I've watched, quite a few of the episodes. So I was thinking about this, of course.
Yes, being the overachiever that you are, you had to prepare so diligently for this.
Oh my gosh. My friend Tania, she calls me an angry white woman for social justice. And I think that who I am at my very core of cores, just who I am inherently as a human being, is I am an activist for social justice. I am a social justice activist. It's something that I really have been doing from a young age.
Okay. This is not in the list of questions. Where does that activist come from? What is the root of that?
That is such an interesting question. When I was growing up, my mom used to tell me that I was born in the wrong, I was in my 20s and teens and 20s in the wrong decade, that I should have been like a 60s, 70s kind of hippie flower child,
I thought you were going to say born in the wrong family. I was like, that's a really bad thing to tell a child, but go ahead.
Could you imagine? Yeah. But they were born in the wrong decade, right? Is that what it would be? 60s or 70s? I'm not sure. I think that I was raised in a very structured family.
Yeah.
Very structured. And I rebel against kind of the status quo of what we are expected to be, or how to be, or what to do, or what makes us valuable, or what our self-worth looks like. And I think that was inherent in me from a young age. I just started kind of questioning everything. And I've always had a very, also my mom used to say, gosh, we thought you would grow out of asking questions, but you just never did. So I also have been a very curious person. So I want to know about things. I want to educate myself and all of that. But I think that I
But
just
asking
have.
questions, I'm going to give you a little homework here. I think you got to
Okay.
dig into this
Okay.
because this is going to give you a lot going forward. But asking questions and challenging authority, those aren't the same as actually caring about the injustices in the world and doing something about it. So I challenge you to think, how did that evolve? And I'm going to tell you a really quick story, and then we got to get back to your interview, which is I've been asking myself the same question for decades. And I finally figured it out.
What?
I listened, I know, I listened to a lot of punk rock, and punk rock in the 80s, when I was listening to it coming out of the Washington D.C. area, which is the genre that I was listening to, was all social justice,
Oh,
all,
oh,
and
yeah.
so I probably had it in my soul, but I really like broke down all the lyrics and what are they saying? What do they mean? And I didn't even always agree with everything they said, but I was like unpacking all of those messages that these bands were sending. And it started ingrained. So that's the root for me, just super random, but I think it's like, it'll be really interesting to have you at some point, right, figure out what really was that thing.
The impetus, what really was it? Because I think that at my core, I'm an empath. I know that.
Yes,
I
sure.
feel very, very deeply when I see anything. I
Yeah.
think that growing up, we didn't always we didn't have a lot of that emotion.
Yeah.
It was a lot of structure, but not emotion. Maybe I swung the opposite way on that pendulum a little bit to
Sure. Yeah.
really, I don't know. That's an
That's good.
interesting question, Clayton.
Okay. So, yeah, that's your homework. I don't normally give homework in the show,
Well,
but
thank you. I mean,
so, all right. So let's go to childhood, just because that's where you start. It's usually where we start too. So just tell me a little bit about, you mentioned a little bit highly structured, but what was life like for you growing up, being the youngest of, three daughters, school, family life, social life, kind of all that stuff.
it was interesting. I was born and raised in Sioux City, Iowa. So that is obviously a Midwest state. The majority of my family is in Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, North Dakota.
Mhm.
And so when I was growing up, there were very traditional roles within the family structure of what the wife provided, what the husband provided, how that relationship and those interactions went. My dad, all my dad's family is in South Dakota, and when we would go to South Dakota, and I always say that all the women were in the kitchen, cleaning up and doing all these things, and I said, yeah, I'm going to go outside and shoot clay pigeons, with the guys. And so from an early age on, I didn't want to really conform to those to those kind of traditional roles. I got very involved in, politics at a young age, which is interesting, being in the Midwest and then moving to a place like LA.
What were the politics that you were raised with, and then what were you interested in from a political standpoint?
Definitely raised, around very conservative politics.
Okay.
I would say I'm a progressive liberal at this point. That's where I would say I stand. So it was a lot of, and I went to Catholic school for 13 years. So I was always being told, what to believe, what to think, what to do, how to behave. And I really started at a young age questioning that and questioning where did I really fit into this structure. And being the youngest of three girls was interesting. My oldest sister never got in trouble. Homecoming queen, cross country star, track star, full ROTC scholarship to college her freshman year. Oh my God, I'll never forget too. I told my dad, I said, I think I could go on like an ROTC scholarship, as well for college. And he said, yeah, I think that you need to look at different areas for scholarships, because once they tell you to drop and give them 25, you're going to be like, okay, I will tell you what you can do with those 25 push-ups, right? Let's talk about that.
All right. So you're already giving me these rebellious sort of themes. So how did you rebel in those early years? Did you rebel against your school administrators, teachers, your parents, or was it all sort of in your head, just sort of stewing?
Oh, no, no, it was very outward. I had a lot of detentions for talking in school. But in my defense, I also had straight A's. So maybe I was bored. Um, so I had a lot of detentions. However,
So that's just
I
talking in class, sort of being disruptive to the rest of the
always,
class.
always. But I was really good friends with the maintenance crew at the school. And so when I had detention, they would get me out of detention so I could go clean the halls with them. And I wouldn't miss practice and I wouldn't have to run extra laps. So that was the that was the trade-off in the school, right?
So you sweet talk the janitors into letting you out early, and you would help them clean a little bit, and then you'd run off to practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
So
that's really funny. Okay. Did you rebel against your parents?
yeah, I mean, if you ask my father, he would tell you with Sarah, I just tried to keep her between the fence posts. And he said, sometimes I would have to pick them up and move the fence posts physically, and keep her right there in those fence. And so I think it was a constant state of questioning. I think it was a constant state of not wanting to have the expectations put on me that were being put on me. And it was my way of rebelling against those. And the more somebody would push me, the more I'd just walk away. I mean, the more I felt backed into a corner, I'd be like, ah.
Did you, so fascinating. Did being the youngest influence that? So did you sort of see your sisters playing along and conforming to the system, and you like something about watching them kind of rubbed you the wrong way and created that little rebel, or literally you just came out of the chute and that's how you were?
That is such a good question, Clayton.
It's okay if you don't know the answer.
Partially, I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think that my middle sister never got caught. If she did anything wrong, I always got caught, or I actually would tell on myself.
But parents get a lot more clever by the third kid.
They do.
The cleverness factor is kind of low for that first kid. And, we get better.
Yeah. But the first child, like she was always so well behaved.
Yeah. We don't have to think about the first as much, maybe.
Yeah. And for me, I think I probably just came out this way. I think it was a lot of this structure that I haven't liked it from day one. I mean, that is what it is. And that has been a big issue, with my diagnoses as well. Mm-hmm. Kind of living in this structure that I did not create for myself. And how
but that rebelliousness, and we'll get into disability journey in a bit, but I think that's really helpful when it comes to disability, because I hear so many times the healthcare system is putting these artificial, uninformed constraints on people in terms of what they can accomplish and do in life. Doesn't mean everyone gets a full recovery from a stroke and things like that. Like, I get that there's data that they can look at and figure out you're probably not going to recover fully. But I just think from what we can do in this community, I think there's just sort of no limits. And I hate to see those constraints. So I like where your brain goes, which is like, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah. I like that. I like how you put that. I'm not going to listen to that. I'm just going to keep going.
Yeah, just figure it out. They're probably wrong. Yeah. And in many cases they are. Right. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
In addition to just living under this oppressive system that everyone else seems to have to live with, but you really didn't like the system of school, parents, all these things that we all had. Did you have any other challenges growing up?
When I was in second grade, probably the most traumatic thing for me was growing up when I was in second grade. Our house burned down, and that's something that I don't think I ever got over. I was really close to where the fire started, and it was our propane tank that had it was the night of Valentine's Day in 1986. And so it was going into February 15th. And we woke up, my dad woke up, and there was a small fire with our propane tank, and he put that fire out. And then during the night, the fire lit up again, I guess you sparked again. And all of a sudden, our whole house was just engulfed in flames. And I remember my bedroom was right by, there was just a wall between me and the bed, and then the actually where the fire had started. So I was very close to the fire. When we had to leave, I remember running up. It was snowing in Iowa. I had to run through the snow. I hadn't brought any of my shoes with me. It was just kind of this mass, it was just kind of a mess, and it was just wild. It was snowing, but our house was on fire, and we lived outside of the city limits. So for the city of Sioux City wouldn't actually come out to fight the fire because it was a county issue. And then when the county came out, they didn't have enough water to kind of finish putting out the fire. And so I lost everything that I had. There were a few things that we got out of the fire that my parents and my sisters got. I didn't get anything out of the fire at that point. And then kind of to add insult to injury, there were looters that came in and looted the rest of the house and took.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God. Who would do that?
You see that all the time, but yes.
And how old are the sisters at that time? So you're in second grade. How old are the sisters?
I was 8. And so my middle sister would have been 12 and my older sister would have been 13.
Okay.
Yeah, we were all young. But I mean, just standing there watching your house, it was just a surreal experience. And I think that changed our family a bit. I think that trauma had just an incredible impact on both of my parents. My dad came from very, very poor background, was born and raised in Pickstown, South Dakota. His mother was a janitor. His father could not work due to alcoholism in the family. And he always just wanted better for us. And then, with my mom, I mean, just seeing like everything that you've worked for and built, and you have these 3 young daughters, and it's just gone. And after that, a lot of our time was spent. My dad was a contractor at the time and owned his own construction company, and he actually rebuilt our home. And so then I spent so much time on the construction site with my dad. He had a bunch of his buddies that came in and would help, would help him with the building, the materials. And there were cats there that we got to play with. And, I was always making like seats for my Barbies, and all of that. But I spent, most of my time outdoors growing up, snowmobiling, sledding, you name it. We were outdoors a lot. And I spent a lot of time with my dad on construction sites. And so it was.
So are you handy?
I'm very handy. I am very handy.
Well, that's a good skill. Okay. So you kind of have a structured life at home as well as school. You are an overachiever. You're good at school. You're good at sports. You're good at music. I was sort of, researching your story a little bit, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like that seems like a lot for a little girl to handle. Were you stressed about your life? Did you struggle to keep all of it in check and all in balance? Or were you just sort of good at everything you did?
I think that there's a lot to unpack with that question. I think that there were, how I felt was that there was an expectation that we would achieve. So is Sarah doing that? Okay, she's going to be good at it. Is Sarah doing that? Okay, she's going to be good at it. So there was the expectation that when we did something that we were going to achieve at it. I think that I never really was able to look at things that I didn't achieve and have an emotional reaction to them, or I could kind of mourn the fact that I didn't achieve this. It was almost like, well, you got a B plus, but if you do X, Y, Z, you'll get an A plus. And so I feel like I came from this place of always wanting to be better. I always needed to be better to get that approval or to get that love or to get that those accolades, I
Mm-hmm.
think.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of forgot the initial question. I'm sorry.
It's just more like, I know you were good at everything, but what was the sort of stress load on you as a young girl?
It was stressful. And I think that is probably why I acted out as well.
Mm-hmm.
There were many times I was in trouble, and I think that goes into acting out because I don't want to live under those expectations. There was a lot of stress for me to always get good grades, to always, achieve and overachieve.
So sometimes acting out, speaking from a parent's perspective, can be, looking for attention, but that wasn't really what you were doing.
Well, I mean, my therapist would probably say differently.
Do we need a caller?
I think you're right. I think that I would do anything to get an emotional reaction, to trigger some sort of an emotional connection or reaction, whether that be positive or negative.
Yep.
Any way I could have some sort of emotional intimacy or connection or conversation. I think that was really probably what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it was that as well.
Okay.
Like I wanted somebody to see me. I wanted somebody to see me and understand that I was not doing well, right? I was had these expectations, and I wanted someone to see that and to hear me. And I really struggled to get that however I could.
Off script a little bit here, but have you had these conversations with your parents?
No.
This is tough stuff you're talking about.
Yeah, this is actually the first podcast interview I've done where I've talked about my family. And like I had really no barriers growing up, right? I am not like some of our guests and my fellow athletes and disabled community members. Like I haven't had those barriers, right?
Yeah.
I haven't had the homelessness, the food insecurities, the racial discrimination, in addition to sexism, the ableism, like those things that people have experienced. I didn't experience those growing up. I just longed for a deeper emotional connection. And I think that really goes back to my initial answering of your question, like what sports saved my life. It's a connection for me. And it's a deeper connection because of the community that we're in, the disabled community. It's like what you kind of touched on. It's like we go in at a much deeper level. Like we've already kind of gone, it's not surface anymore.
You're so right. And even I tell this to people all the time, just show up at an event and just go walk up to people and ask them what's, how they're doing. And you can ask about their disability. They will tell you. And people don't even think I'm telling them the truth. They think I'm lying to them. I'm like, no. Look, I don't know that person. I'll go ask them. And like, right. Because once we're together, we're cool. Whatever. It's,
totally. So, and that's where I connect the most. But this is really not something I've talked with my parents about. I think that there's a lot there, right? And if you are not an emotional person, or don't know how to hold other people's emotions, or don't know how to meet them and hold those emotions for them, I can't blame them for that either. That's not something that they got when they were being raised. So I have to kind of have my own boundaries around that and how
Yeah.
deep it can go. But I also, there's a part of me that after my diagnoses and what I went through with my inner ear disease disorder of being undiagnosed and misdiagnosed for so long, that, oh, dang it. Forgot my train of thought. That's an MS issue. So we call those MSMs. Um, anyway, I just think that overall, it's something that I need to kind of process
Yeah.
it and figure out. And I have swung the exact opposite way when it comes to, I mean, when you look at political, when you look at
Yeah, right.
where I live, when you look at what I do, I think pretty much my whole life has been not a rebellion against authority, but
That
somewhat
like a reaction, maybe is a
a
better word,
reaction.
right?
Yeah, a reaction to it.
I think I just appreciate you sharing that. And I love this part of the show for this reason, which is we're all, sort of this residual human being that's were formed in those early, childhood moments. And there's so many interesting things. I just think we all can appreciate and understand each other better when we really understand how we were raised and what were those experiences, whether there was trauma or no trauma, or just, in your case, really high expectations across the board. And, I had a little bit of similar thing more on academics that I sort of screwed with for a while. And I finally got my act together. But like, it's a whole, we all have these stresses and pressures and they come from different places. So just thanks for going there with us. I'd like to take a quick break to show you how you can get involved as a volunteer with Angel City Sports.
Are you interested in supporting Angel City Sports? We're seeking volunteers to help organize clinics and events, as well as support our athlete outreach efforts, marketing and media, and even fundraising and development. All skill sets and backgrounds are welcome in support of our mission to provide free adaptive sport opportunities for children, adults, and veterans with physical disabilities or visual impairments. For our younger athletes, we welcome you to join the Angel City Youth Leadership Council. Middle and high school age students are eligible to join the Youth Leadership Council, where you will learn about the disabled community by working side by side with our athletes and acquire important skills such as teamwork, leadership, philanthropy, and event management. To sign up for our volunteer newsletter and stay up to date on all upcoming opportunities, visit angelcitysports.org.
In that time period, pre-diagnosis, but snuggled up right before it, are you feeling symptoms of MS and just not understanding what they are and what was going on?
The odd thing is that I went to a wedding in June of 2010. I was fine, flew back from Chicago, landed at LAX, got off the plane, and I couldn't hear out of my left ear. Like it was just completely closed. Like it wouldn't pop, right?
Mhm.
It didn't pop for 10 years. That 9 years. So it started with that. And
Hold on. You couldn't hear out of your ear for 9 years? And did they say that it was MS related? What was the story?
Well, initially they said, okay, so this was my first symptom. And then
hold on. I get kind of panicky when my ears ring and I feel like it's not going to go away. And I know people that literally doesn't go away and it sort of drives them crazy. Did this make you panicky to realize you couldn't hear, or you were kind of accepting of it?
Well, I just didn't really know. No, God, no, I was panicked. I mean, because the fact that my ear didn't pop, then I spent the next 7 days in bed and I had vertigo. I had my migraine with aura. So basically, you go blind. It's like all these lights that come on, and then you basically just eventually goes black.
That's insane.
It was horrible. And that was for about 7 days on and off.
So this is the first symptom of what would be your MS diagnosis.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going. This is great stuff.
So they had originally thought I had a vestibular schwannoma because I had acquired nystagmus, and I'll tell you about what both of those are. But acquired nystagmus is when your eyes jerk uncontrollably back and forth.
Okay.
And I had never had that previously. And so they thought, okay, she can't hear out of her ear. She's got this acquired nystagmus. Let's look at her brain. We think she has a vestibular schwannoma that sits on the optic nerve and the ear canals. And it's not cancerous, but we need to remove it if that's what it is. Well, then they did an MRI and they saw lesions all over my brain. And once that happened, it was like, okay, now let's send her to the rheumatologist, test for lupus, look at, Parkinson's, cerebral, anything that they could think of.
So they really didn't know. They started from a blank. They knew something was going on, but they started from kind of a blank sheet of paper.
Yeah, they had no idea. And once I got that diagnosis, they really forgot about my ear diagnosis. And they just forgot that this ear was bothering me.
Really? Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Were there additional symptoms that helped them get the MS diagnosis, or what was that?
Yeah, by the time they diagnosed me, I was all the way numb down the left side of my back. My balance was so bad that I would actually like run into walls. Like my perception was off. So I would think I would clear a corner, but I wouldn't. And I'm talking like I would slam into corners when I would go around them. Right. So,
but does MS give you that kind of like, does that affect your perception as well?
Absolutely.
It does. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes. Your optic nerves,
I got you.
All of that. What else? I have spastic muscles, I always say, so I have muscle spasticity. It's always like I'm on like a little volcano of my own, I'm always moving like internally, even though everything around me is fine. So like right now I'm sitting here and like, it feels like there's a little volcano under my feet, regardless of where I put them,
And is your back still numb?
Yeah. Right now my back is numb, and
so that comes and goes.
And that's the relapsing remitting. That was one thing that when your other guest was on too, that's interesting about the relapsing remitting is that the remitting part it's only considered a relapse if it's a brand new symptom for, 7 days or longer. Because if it's just a returning symptom, that means that it's just, you've got some symptoms that are coming back. You've got a flare up or an exacerbation. But if you have an actual relapse, then you have a new symptom. It's almost kind of like whatever damage has been done to that point of diagnosis before you get on therapy medication, that damage is done. Like there'll be some self-healing, but it won't heal. That damage will always be done. It's what you're trying to avoid is further damage moving forward.
You're trying to limit the progression.
Yes.
Of the disease.
Yes, absolutely.
And for you, let's stay on MS, and then I want to move to the inner ear stuff because I think that's really fascinating and unique. What do they tell you about that progression? And you've been at this for a while now, and I know you're actively working and fighting against that progression. But what did they tell you? Have you sort of beat the odds so far? And what are they saying about you going forward?
They have no idea.
Really?
Quite honestly, I was just at Rancho the other day talking with some friends. There's an old like MS scale of functionality, but it's old. So you don't ever really know. And quite honestly, I was at an event the other day and I was talking to the director of the Maryland Hilton MS Achievement Center at UCLA. And we were talking about how what we're told is here are your medication options. You can control your stress, your health, diet, and your exercise. And that's pretty much it. And go do sitting yoga. I mean, it's very... Like, why aren't we talking about the opportunities for people like me who've grown up with sports, who've grown up with an active lifestyle, that want to go play, that let's talk about opportunities to go play. I don't need to play to a point where I push myself and I go blind. But I can go play some recreational sports and not sit at home and be told just to walk when I can. I think we should have a little bit higher expectations.
So listen, I feel like the healthcare industry gets these things wrong all the time. So, and I'm not trying to throw rocks, but I feel like when people are diagnosed with MS, they are sort of led down this path that does not include real physical activity or any kind of sport. And in your experience, do you feel like your higher level of physical activity than maybe the doctor would have prescribed you has helped slow your progression? So are we sitting on a strategy for slowing the progression? We know it's progressive. There's probably not much right now we know how to turn that around, but are we just sort of sitting on this strategy that's not really being used and communicated to the MS community?
I think that's twofold question, because one could be with regard to actual direct effect. The other one is the community effect, right?
For sure. Yeah. Mental health kind of.
Absolutely. And education wise, now all of a sudden I'm around people who are talking about similar things, right? I had a girlfriend over the other day who was talking about nerve pain and a medication she takes, gabapentin. She's an amputee. Well, gabapentin is something that we take in the MS community for nerve pain. There are these overlaps and shared experiences that I think that, really,
you're not going to get that going to your MS doctor's office.
Or to an MS self-help group.
Sure.
Like we were talking about before, we're very siloed. And adaptive sports are really the one area where we're not siloed, where we have SCI, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, stroke, spina bifida, post-polio, MS, whatever you have. I mean, it's a one area where there is, for sure, cross-disability collaboration.
Yeah.
And
I say this all the time. You're absolutely right. We're all siloed by disability type. And you're right. There aren't, we know a ton of amputees because of my son, Ezra. But until we got really engaged in this community, we didn't really know people with all these other disabilities. And so you're right. And the strategies, the journey, a lot of these things are similar, even though the disabilities look very different.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to that deeper level of understanding and empathy that we have for one another. That's not sympathy or sadness or, also a place where we can be positive about disability. I've heard many of your guests say, disability is not a bad word. I was at the dog park the other day and this gentleman kept saying, my friend's confined to a wheelchair. And I said, please stop. He is a wheelchair user, and so it's kind of changing those perceptions. But I think that when we do it in a cross disability, collectively cross disability, we have a much larger voice, which is why I am so big about adaptive sports. That is our one opportunity for us to cross those barriers, break down those walls, and to connect with people around our shared experience that's different but shared, if that makes sense.
I think that's amazing. It's so aligned with kind of how I'm thinking about this community. And just before we move on, one thing that I think a lot about too is, wheelchair basketball is not for the faint of heart. So I'm not here suggesting that everyone with MS should jump in a chair and play wheelchair basketball. That being said, if you're at the higher level of ability, probably it's fine. He's got to monitor it the way you do. But then there is this whole spectrum of adaptive sports that have different impacts, right? You could do badminton,
volleyball,
table tennis, sitting volleyball. You get really impaired at some point, you could do bocce, whatever, we figure it out. That's our job as coaches and, program leaders. So, anyone listening with MS, come play, let's go. We'll figure it out for you.
And you're right. Not everyone with MS should or maybe even wants to play basketball. But I
Right.
think that gets to a bigger question about MS, Clayton, that we were talking about, reaching this community, because there aren't a lot of people with MS or neurological diseases, disorders like MS that are in adaptive sports. I think that one is lack of education. And I think two is, if you asked anyone in the two self-help groups that one I co-facilitate with my husband, and the other I started with a friend of mine, 8 years ago. If you ask them, are they disabled? The answer is no. It's also about self-identifying.
Yeah.
Or even, the medical community identifying verbally, not like, oh, you'll figure it out at some point. You may or may not. No, you have a disability. Your cognition is changing. Your brain, you have brain fog. You have, I have a lot of word finding issues, cognitive issues. I'm really good until a certain time in the day, and then I'm not. And those are really hard for me to explain. And I feel badly explaining that, right? And that's where we have to get into our pride that, just because I function differently and my body doesn't function how a typical, body does, that's not bad. But I remember when I started playing wheelchair basketball, some of my girlfriends with MS came out and they cried. Why would you want to sit in a wheelchair if you aren't a wheelchair user? And one of my responses was, dang, if I'm going to have to use this chair down the line, I'm going to be really good at it. Overachiever.
No, but that's a sad, right? That's a sort of a sad indication of sort of the stigma out there, because
absolutely,
if anyone has played wheelchair basketball, it's really fun. It's hard. It's really hard, but it is so fun. And so it's an uninformed comment based on old stigmas that obviously we have a lot of work to do to knock down. Okay. Hopefully this will get out to the MS community, because this is really powerful.
Oh, I'm going to send it to a lot of people. Don't worry.
Good. Can we talk about the inner ear challenges that you had? And I know that diagnosis comes 9 years after MS, right? 8 or 9 years later. What happened there? And does that also have do you trace it back to the hearing loss episode in 2010? Was it?
Yeah, absolutely traces back to that. This was not even part of my MS, the whole ear thing. So from June of 2010 until October of 2018, when I actually diagnosed myself, because I had been researching for years, but I had all these weird symptoms that other people with MS didn't have. And I was very involved in the community. I talked to people who didn't have MS, who had other diagnoses and other injuries and whatnot. And it was just so uncommon and no one talked about it. But what I was experiencing was, from that point in time, June of 2010, I started being able to hear my internal organs moving. And it got increasingly worse for 9 years. And so it started out.
What is that? I can't even imagine what that is. What does that sound like?
It's so hard. So I have superior semicircular canal dehiscence bilaterally. So I have it in both ears. So eventually I'll have to have surgery in this other ear. And I've had surgery in this ear.
Okay.
But basically, what happens with SSCD is that there are two windows in your superior semicircular canal that allow breathing and air and, the eustachian tube to open and close and function as it should. And of course, I have a third window on both sides, which allows there's no barrier between the brain fluid and the ear canal. So what happens is that you hear your internal organs as though the messages are being sent to your brain, right? So this is what your brain is receiving, but we're also hearing it. So I'll tell you, my first symptom was that I could hear my eyeballs moving. And I had migraines with aura with that, but what would happen is that when I looked peripherally, I mean, I couldn't look peripherally for 9 years. When I looked peripherally, I would hear the muscles around my eyeball
Mm.
contracting around my eyeball and like grinding around the eyeball. So it would be like this swoosh and then like grinding and this swoosh and grinding. And I would get so nauseous. Then I would get vertigo and then I would be really sick. So they started treating, migraine, and they said, yep, no, it's MS, it's MS. Then I would walk and I would hear my heel. Like I didn't take shoes off in any location for 9 years. Because when I would walk on my heel, I would hear my heel as my heel touches the ground, right? So that bone and that skin and all of that, I would hear that in my ears.
Oh, I've never heard of such a thing.
Horrible. Constant tinnitus. I still have tinnitus. Like I don't remember a time when my head has been silent. I don't in the last 11 years. Well, not even now, because I have it in the other side. So then I started to be able to hear my neck muscles. So I would kind of like move my neck. And I know most people can hear that. But for me, it was like grinding around my spinal cord. So you could hear the fluid, like the spinal cord fluid.
Wow.
And the muscles and all of it grinding as I would move my neck. And then, it just kept getting worse. And then the worst symptom happened. And that was when I could start hearing my heartbeat in my left ear. And that's when I started to isolate. And that's when I really checked out. I left California and I was like, I can't function this way. But it would get to a point where I would, I'm a really excitable person and I would get really excited. And the more excited I got, the louder this heartbeat would be in my ear.
Whoa.
And we're talking to a point of, I couldn't hear anything else around me. I could only hear my heart beating in my left ear. And when my husband and I moved back here in May of 2018, back to California, I was distraught. I was, I didn't know really how I could continue to live with that. And then when I went in to see my doctor,
I made the comment earlier of just a ringing that drives people.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's anxiety and panic inducing and right. And this is a whole nother level.
Well, and it's exhausting too, because your body's working so hard because you're working to overcome these noises that you're hearing in your own body. So it just became really difficult to have conversations with people. My providers literally wanted to put me in a mental health institution. They were like, you have adjustment disorder, you have schizophrenia, you have bipolar disorder. And so I just stopped talking about it eventually because no one would help me. And then in October of 2018, I found it myself. And I found the diagnosis and I went into my neurologist and I said, I know I'm not a doctor. I know you hate WebMD, but I need you to, this is what I've been telling you guys for, years, since June of 2010. And she said, nope, you don't have that, blah, blah, blah. Went back in April of 2019. And I'm by this point, it was so loud in my ear. I told my now husband, I was like, I cannot continue to live this way. I cannot continue to engage in life this way. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like if somebody doesn't help me soon, it was really, really bad. It was very scary. I didn't want to share it with anybody because I felt very judged because maybe I am, maybe I do have mental health issues.
By the way, you're breaking my heart because I've known you through this really bad period and I had no idea. And I am so sorry that you went through this and didn't feel, I mean, I get it, but like just to do that alone or relatively alone. Oh my gosh.
It was rough. I'm sorry. I get teary-eyed still. In April of 2019, my doctor, my neurologist refused again. And it took me 3 more months to go around her in the same department, same university, to go to neurosurgery. And I got them on the phone and I said, I know this is what I have. I said, it's the only symptom that's different is the autophony. And now keep in mind, I am like diminished, right? Like I have been in survival mode for how long? I'm just begging, for someone to help me. And really, when I think about it, Clayton, thinking back on it, I probably always knew I would figure it out and I would get help. But now what I use that for is that look at me as a person with no barriers really growing up, right? English is my first language. I worked in healthcare. I have a graduate degree. If there is someone that should be able, right, in this privileged society, so you can't tell me that other people aren't experiencing worse than this. And that's what breaks my heart, because I know how I was.
And you somehow had this belief you were going to solve it and that kept you going. But I got to believe that there's other people that have had what you had and just didn't make it that far.
Yeah. And that breaks my heart.
It sounds really, really hard.
And then I finally called UCLA neurosurgery and I told them, and I said, the only thing that's different is autophony, and that's the hearing of your internal organs. And she was like, you have to have a diagnosis. And I lost it. I mean, I was like, where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to go? Where do you want me to go to get this diagnosis? And I just begged her and begged her. Anyway, they ended up getting me in to see one of the doctors a week later. They didn't have to do any tests. They diagnosed me on the spot. And I will never forget when this woman looked at me and she put her hand on my leg and she said, we believe you and we're going to help you. And I was like, oh my God.
Did you just start crying?
I did. I mean, it's still to this day, Clayton, this is one of the issues with our medical healthcare system that I think it's really important that I continue to be an activist in that area, because again, if we're holding someone like me to a standard of that's who can access healthcare, that's totally incorrect. Obviously, and we need to, be inclusive, have more inclusive practices and to help people, because I didn't want to live like that. And you're right. There were a lot of people that may not have even made it to the point that I made it.
But Sarah, you're right. And I so appreciate you for staying in it, solving it for yourself, and now being a voice for others. I feel like it lives at a higher level than even what your experience was, which is it often happens that healthcare providers aren't really listening or hearing or capable of hearing what's going on. And so people are told no in a million different scenarios. And we don't all feel the same empowerment to sort of fight that no. And in your case, you just articulated a lifelong practice of fighting no's, right? Or fighting being told what to do, being fearless, being outspoken. Like you kind of are like the perfect mix to actually survive this. But I think about this also in the context of insurance denials, which are commonplace in our community for wheelchair users, for amputees, for legs, like you name it. And when you get denied, you have a choice. You either accept it and figure out life and find some other hack, or you fight it. And it takes a lot of energy to fight the system. And you don't always feel like you're going to win, and it's disheartening. And so I feel like that's where we all need to kind of play, which is when you are told no, when you are denied, when you are told you're crazy, when you're told that, you're wrong, whatever, we all kind of have to help each other fight back.
Yeah.
Not that we're always right, but like a lot of the time we are right. I mean, if a kid needs a prosthetic leg or a new wheelchair or whatever, they're right. All right. So let's talk about your love for wheelchair basketball. Let's talk a little bit about, you played at Rancho and then you got to join the Shield Maidens and kind of help them from behind the scenes, not as a founder. Sorry.
Oh gosh, no,
No. But I know you were really integral in kind of getting that going, and now kind of in the rebuilding phase. So yeah, just kind of share a little bit about that journey, and maybe why you're so motivated to be a leader and make it happen. What is that for you?
Oh gosh, what that is for me is just long story short is the fact that I believe that every woman with a disability should have a community like I've had, and an opportunity to have a community and a family like I have
Mm.
through wheelchair basketball. When I started playing at Rancho, it wasn't like I thought I was going to be, I didn't even actually know. I think I told you this before. Like, I didn't even know it was a Paralympic sport. I didn't really know much about Paralympics.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't been around disability much growing up. My parents had a friend who had MS and a couple of other relatives, but like that was really it. And so when I went to Rancho, and then now I'm diagnosed as well, there's this whole, kind of different setup. And so, yeah, I mean, it started at Rancho as a way to just joke around about disability, right? Like, I was really the only adult female on that team, and we just had a lot of fun. I mean, they would be like, use your ovaries, when I was trying to shoot and I couldn't make the basket, but it was a way to, you're like, that's not funny, but
it's kind of funny.
We had fun, you know what I mean? And it was a way for me to check out. That wasn't numbing through other means, self-numbing through, other avenues. And so for me, that was where I could go and kind of numb out and be myself. And then I'm playing in like a summer league with the guys at Rancho, and Courtney and Molly are there, and they're going to form, this is like 2015 summer, and they're going to form this women's team, right? So I get off the court and I'm like, I totally want to be on your women's team. I'm like, was that my audition? I'm like, did you guys see me? That was a really good audition, right? And they're like, an audition, like, this isn't the theater. So, they're like tryouts, and we kind of started building it all. And these women became my family. Mm-hmm. All of them. There's not one of them in a different, okay. So across all disabilities, across all social categorizations, across all expectations that the world has put on us, across all of these things, we all came together as this group of women empowering other women. And it just has been that consistent family and friendship. And we have arguments, and we have disagreements, and we have, how should we move forward, or how should we, all of these conversations, because it's a family. And for me, we've had a lot of changes, as you know, with our program, and we have now teamed up and are coming under the Angel City Sports umbrella, because during the pandemic, our program, I saw where our program was headed, given all the changes, and I could not, in my heart of hearts, let it go. I could not let that program go. My nickname growing up was Bird Dog. So I was like bird dogging it, like I just was on it. Do you know what bird dog is?
I mean, explain it in case there's like a non-English speaker that's listening.
Right. It's just like you're a hunting dog and you just point at something. Like once you're there, like you're there. Like that's all you can think about and see and whatever. And so
you're sort of you're sort of, I don't know what the word is, solely focused on something and you don't let it go.
Yes. So I have been solely focused on this team now. And I remember three years ago, you and I and Camille talked about how we could expand women's wheelchair basketball opportunities all across California, and how we look at branches in an area, and we connect, collective access and resources for women across California. Because for me, the saddest part is that we have 8 to 12 players every year, and there are way more women with disabilities that we are not hitting, that don't know about this opportunity, that don't know that you don't have to be highly competitive. I mean, I just wanted to come play, and I was competitive on the court, but I was like, I'm never going to be a Paralympian, right? Although I think I did tell Courtney one time I might be. And then we raced and I was like, never mind.
But I think, we also, you don't know where these things take you in life. And for example, there are a number of schools, you probably know the exact number, that have women's college wheelchair basketball teams. And so is it always a full ride, free ride? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe there's partial scholarships, but like you can go to college and be a collegiate wheelchair basketball player. And that is really remarkable. And I don't know that everybody even understands that that's an opportunity. And yeah, those girls aren't going to all make the Paralympic team. This is a broader base of athletes that are playing at the collegiate level. And so there are ways this opens doors. It probably opens doors to jobs at organizations like Angel City and, other programs around, because you really understand this community. So like, who knows where it takes you in life, right? It doesn't have to take you to the Paralympics. It can take you a million other ways at places.
Absolutely. And the deeper understanding of the disability community, as opposed to just my own diagnoses, is huge as well for us to understand one another and our shared experiences. But I for me, this basketball team that we've held on to for so many years, it is time for it to blossom and bloom into this program that connects all of us women living with disabilities and gives us that empowerment and the empowerment to come out and say, I do have a disability, right? Like I remember, quick story, when I started playing basketball and they were like, you don't ever get out of your chair. Don't ever get out of your chair, right? Because
you walk.
Because you walk.
Yeah.
And that was 8 years ago. Fast forward now, we're very much like, get out of your chair. You don't have to be a chair user to have a disability. Like we need to talk about it and educate people. But, even that is changing, because I remember I would feel so guilty, like being in my chair and then standing up out of it. And I felt like a fraud. But in this community, you're just one of them. You're just one of the girls, you're just one on the team. And I think that even at a young age, those teams were always important to me for that support and that emotional connection. And again, goes back to connection.
Yeah. Final section is our soul searching. So this is rapid fire answers.
Oh no.
I know you did your research, so you know what's coming.
Oh shoot, I didn't do this research.
Okay, you good. Good. You're ready for it. Fun or interesting fact that I do not know about you. Go.
Oh gosh, I was chased by a chicken when I was little on a farm, and I'm scared of chickens.
That is perfect. What has your disability taught you?
Oh man, that we get one go around, and I for sure am going to live as authentically and to leave as much of an impact as I can of change. Good impact.
Good. What have you learned about self-acceptance in your life so far?
Work in progress.
What do you learn from your mistakes?
What do I learn from my mistakes? Humility. I think I'm always making mistakes, and I believe the more I learn, the less I actually know. So I think we have to stay humble.
That's good. What brings you stress, and how do you deal with it?
Brings me stress. Oh my gosh. People who don't understand the importance of disability access and inclusion brings me stress. What do I do about it? I go back to my community of girls.
Start screaming. I don't always throw this question up, but I'm going to give it to you because I feel like your journey is really fascinating, especially with the double diagnosis, I'm going to call it. What do you think is the purpose that what is your purpose? Why did you have to go through this?
Oh gosh, that is so interesting. I just had a conversation with a gentleman at the dog park, a new friend at the dog park the other day. And, I think that I've been asking myself that for a long time. Like, what really is the purpose of our life on this and our existence? It cannot be to get up, go to work, have this. Like, there has to be
make money, have material
yeah,
things, leave generational wealth for your kids, whatever. Like, give me a break.
all of it. There has to be a bigger purpose, and I've told my husband this. I feel like I've always felt like I've been meant for a bigger purpose. And I feel like with my diagnosis, it was very clear where the path lay for me to use my voice to advocate and be an activist for people who haven't found their voice yet, right? May never find their voice in this community. To hear the stories from these people that we don't hear all the time, to be able to bring their stories to the forefront. But I think my purpose in general is to I know that people say like make change, but I think my purpose is to change the perspective of disability, to change the conversation around disability, to bring my kind of comedic side and my professional side and bring all those to, have real conversations that are pretty uncomfortable sometimes for people to have. And when you're in the disability community, as long as, we've been, we take for granted that other people aren't as comfortable as we are. You know what I mean? Like, we're like, oh, have this conversation and that conversation.
I think there's something really there for you. And obviously you've studied journalism. You're an amazing communicator. You're interrupting your teachers probably because you thought you could explain things better than they can. But I think that there's a place for you in helping us understand things that are hard to understand, because your disability is hard to understand and how it's affected you, because you walk around and it's sort of like, what's really wrong with you? And it's like, okay. And then the inner ear thing is another thing. It's kind of invisible, even though if you're running into walls or whatever, like maybe it's kind of like, something's going on with Sarah, but right. So like disabilities already kind of poorly understood. And then you kind of go to the things that you've been dealing with are really hard to understand, because you can't put yourself in your shoes. It's impossible. But I think you are a wonderful voice for these things that are really hard to understand. And I love that about your journey, because you're such a good communicator and so clear and so like, bam, you don't mince words. Okay. So, the very, very last section is I give you the microphone to wrap up your story. Anything you missed, anything you want to touch on, anything you want to reinforce, message, thank somebody, anything. The floor is yours.
Oh, man. I would say to anyone who is grappling with really owning their disability as part of themselves, just do it. It feels so much better. Find the places where you feel most like yourself. For me, that is wheelchair basketball. I feel I was telling Camille this the other day, Clayton, when I'm on that court and around that community, I feel most like myself.
Yeah, sure.
And so I encourage people to find a space where they feel most accepted, to be themselves, where they can feel the most like themselves. And that's kind of it. I mean, I feel like you're not alone. There's so many of us who struggle with sharing what we go through, and just know that there are people out here that will take a personal phone call at any point in time, that will have that conversation, that will meet you for coffee and take that time out of their life to support you. But you got to find those people, because also, we lose relationships. And I think that it's a balance of, you lose relationships because of kind of misunderstandings of your disability and how that affects you. But you gain these other amazing relationships that are probably deeper, greater connections than you had before.
That's really good advice. That's a really good way to think about it. There's some loss, but there's gain as well. Okay. And where can people follow you, follow your journey, get in touch with you?
Oh gosh, I have a website. It's called ilevel.works. And I have to tell you, on a side note of that, that the name of my business came from our women's wheelchair basketball team. So we were at a tournament at maybe 2018, and I was talking about what I was doing and my business and whatnot. And we sat down and had this whole conversation about how we want to be communicated to, and it's really, if we can see each other at eye level and be at that eye level with them, that's where it works, right? That's where we can connect with one another. And so really, it came out of basketball too. So it really, my whole journey in the disability community has been wheelchair basketball and adaptive sports. And that's why I feel so strongly for it and continuing it. But you can find me on my website. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And then I'm on Instagram, ilevel.works, and Facebook, ilevel.works.